The air at Arlington National Cemetery carried a silence that felt sacred. Tourists whispered, veterans stood stiffly, and children were hushed by parents who understood that this was no ordinary place. All eyes were drawn toward the tomb of the unknown soldier, where a single guard moved with precision to 1 steps. Pause, turn, 21 steps again. Every motion was measured, every second, deliberate. To break that silence felt almost criminal. And then it happened. A man in a dark blue dress uniform stepped out from the crowd. His medals gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his posture screamed arrogance. He was a Russian Marine, broad-shouldered, his boots clicking confidently as he cut across the stone pathway. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Who was he to intrude on such a moment? American soldier. The Marine barked, his accent thick but his words sharp. Do you not recognize when a superior officer stands before you? Gasps escaped from the crowd. Some thought this had to be staged, maybe part of the ceremony, but the tension in the guard's jaw told a different story. The tomb guard did not move. His rifle remained cradled at his shoulder, eyes locked straight ahead, expression carved in stone. He did not flinch, did not blink. To him, the Russian's voice was nothing more than wind against marble. The Marine smirked. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms as if to perform. You see, even here they bow in silence. This is not discipline, it is obedience. A veteran near the front shook his head in disgust. A child clutched her mother's hand tighter. Phones came up, cameras began rolling, the world about to capture something unforgettable. The crowd expected the guard to step aside, to acknowledge the man's demand. After all, this intruder looked powerful, his chest heavy with ribbons of combat. But the guard's silence was deafening, his stillness louder than any insult. For one suspended moment, it felt like time itself was waiting to see if the intruder's arrogance would topple the immovable weight of tradition. And then the narrator's voice cut in, calm but sharp. The crowd thought he would step aside, but in the next moment, the world saw what honor truly means. The guard who stood that day was not just any soldier. Beneath the crisp uniform, beneath the flawless discipline, lived a young man who had already seen war, loss, and sacrifice long before he ever set foot on the sacred mat of Arlington. His name rarely mattered to the world, because in this place he did not stand for himself. He stood for the countless whose names were never known. Years earlier, he had marched through the dust and heat of Iraq. His unit had been ambushed, and in the chaos of gunfire and explosions, his closest friend, his battle brother, was struck down beside him. The memory of that moment was carved into his heart deeper than any scar. He carried the weight of it in silence, a promise whispered into the desert wind. I will not forget you. I will carry your honor. When he returned home, broken but alive, he knew he could not simply fade back into ordinary life. He sought something greater, a way to serve even in peace. That search led him to the old guard, and finally to the post that demanded the highest discipline known to any soldier, the tomb of the unknown soldier. Here, there were no excuses, no distractions. The drills were endless. Day after day, he perfected each step until it was flawless. Storms pounded the cemetery, yet he stood motionless in the rain. Heat waves shimmered from the marble, yet his face remained still. He did not do it for applause, nor for recognition, but for the countless who never returned from battle. To him, every second of stillness was an act of remembrance. Every measured stride was a prayer spoken without words. The Russian Marine who stood before him that afternoon carried a very different story. Raised in a system where rank was everything, where hierarchy dictated respect, he had known only one language, the language of authority. He was a decorated man, yes, a veteran of conflicts his country seldom admitted publicly. His chest was heavy with medals, each one proof of battles fought and survival earned. But beneath the surface, there was arrogance, a belief that his own service made him superior, that others should acknowledge his presence with immediate recognition. To him, ceremony was a game. Tradition was nothing more than theater. When he saw the American guard standing silent, he mistook it for weakness. He thought the stillness was submission. The stage for their clash could not have been more symbolic. Arlington National Cemetery is not just grounded, it's sacred earth. Beneath the endless rows of white headstones rest men and women from every war America has fought, stretching back to the Revolution. Each stone, a story. Each grave, a reminder. And at the heart of it all, the tomb of the unknown soldier. It is a place where names are lost, but honor is eternal. No visitor comes here without feeling the weight of history pressing down, without realizing that silence is the purest language spoken. The crowd that gathered that day sensed the tension instantly. Veterans knew the code of the guard. They knew that silence was not weakness. but strength. Families with children whispered, trying to explain the meaning of the tomb to little ones who could barely understand. Cameras, however, understood only spectacle, and already lenses were rising, recording every moment. Reporters, tourists, strangers all, unwitting witnesses to what was about to unfold. The Russian Marine had no reverence for the ground he walked on. He had fought his wars under different flags, buried his dead in different soil, and he looked upon Arlington as little more than a stage where he could assert himself. Perhaps he believed the guard would recognize his medals, would break his silence out of respect, or fear, or habit. But he did not understand what bound the American guard to his post. He did not understand that this stillness was not about one man, it was about thousands. The guard, meanwhile, felt the intruder's presence like a storm rolling in. He heard the heavy boots, sensed the arrogance, but his training held him steady. He did not glance. He did not twitch. Inside, though, there was a fire. Every part of him wanted to defend the sanctity of that ground, but he knew his strength lay not in rash movement but in perfect restraint. His silence was his shield, his stillness, his weapon. For the onlookers, the tension was almost unbearable. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Veterans clenched their jaws, muttering that the man should step back. A child's voice whispered too loudly, "Why is he so close?" And all the while, the guards' boots clicked in their endless rhythm. 21 steps, pause, 21 steps. The Russian Marine mistook this ritual for mockery. To him, it seemed like defiance. His pride swelled, his anger kindled. He thought he would prove a point that even here, on American soil, his presence demanded recognition. What he could not see, what he could never understand, was that he was no longer facing another man. He was facing a tradition older and stronger than himself. He was facing every nameless soldier who had ever fallen, every family who had ever stood before a folded flag, every tear shed at every graveside. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Something was about to break. One man stood arrogant, demanding respect. The other stood silent, guarding something far greater than himself. The world would soon discover which was stronger, ego or honor. The Russian Marine took a deliberate step closer. Each click of his polished boots echoed like a challenge across the marble pathways. He raised his voice, sharp and commanding, a tone that brooked no question. "Do you not recognize when a superior officer stands before you?" The crowd stiffened. Some instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to intervene, unsure whether the silent American guard would finally respond. Veterans whispered to one another, their brows furrowed. Children pressed closer to parents, sensing the tension but not fully understanding its weight. Phones rose like tiny beacons, capturing every heartbeat of what was unfolding. The guard did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, on nothing and everything at once. His rifle rested lightly against his shoulder, a polished symbol of discipline that did not waver. In that stillness, there was power, absolute, unshakable. The Marine circled slowly, scanning him as if trying to read a puzzle, and failing at every glance. "This is ridiculous," the Marine said, voice laced with mockery. "Even here, you Americans bow to authority. You tremble when someone stronger approaches." His chest swelled. The medals on his uniform glittered in the sunlight, each one a story of battle and survival. But now, to him, each one was a justification. He had fought wars. He had faced death. And yet here, on foreign ground, the guard remained motionless. That silence was a puzzle, an insult, a challenge he had not anticipated. He spoke again, louder this time. "Do you even know what respect means? Or are you just another coward hiding behind tradition?" A veteran's hand tightened on his cane. "Disgrace," he muttered under his breath. "He doesn't understand." The crowd was a mix of reactions. Some were horrified at the audacity of the intruder. Some were transfixed, unable to look away from the silent stalemate. Children whispered questions they did not expect answers to. Cameras rolled, zooming in on the guard's unflinching face. The Marine's smirk, the stark contrast between two worlds colliding in one sacred space. The Marine stepped closer still, deliberately invading the boundary that had always separated visitor from guardian. His shadow fell across the white marble, a literal and figurative looming presence. He raised a hand to point directly at the guard, his finger trembling slightly with suppressed anger. "Do you think you are untouchable because of some stupid ceremony? I've seen soldiers like you soft, weak, obedient. You answer to me now." The guard's jaw tightened. Still, he did not move. His silence was not surrender. It was a weapon forged in countless hours of discipline, honed through storms, heat, and the memories of fallen comrades. Inside a fire burned, every muscle was ready, every nerve alert, but the outward image was perfection, calm, unyielding, unbroken. The Marine's gestures grew bolder. He circled closer, then suddenly stopped. Standing directly in front of the guard, he leaned slightly, enough to be invasive, enough to test. "I am not used to being ignored," he growled. "In my world, silence is obedience. Answer me." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying the tension across rows of headstones. The children gasped softly. A photographer adjusted his lens, unsure whether to capture confrontation or catastrophe. The veteran's jaws tightened in collective frustration, knowing that one wrong move could escalate the moment beyond control. The guard's mind was a temple of order. Years of training in combat zones and ceremonial perfection gave him clarity. He understood the threat, he recognized the provocation, but he also knew that control was his greatest weapon. Every step the Marine took, every insult, every attempt at intimidation, was met with stillness, not weakness, not fear, discipline. The Marine's frustration grew. His tone sharpened, cutting across the silence of the cemetery. "I've seen tougher men than you crumble," he spat. He gestured aggressively toward the guard's rifle. "Even that weapon is a joke here. You follow rules that make you weak." The crowd reacted instinctively. Veterans muttered under their breath, some shaking their heads, others stepping closer. Children hid behind parents, wide-eyed. Reporters whispered into cameras, "Is this part of the ceremony? Or, is this real?" The tension was electric, a visible line stretching from one soldier to another, a battle of wills without a single punch thrown. The guard's body remained rigid, each muscle perfectly aligned. His boots remained planted firmly on the marble. His eyes did not waver. He did not speak, and yet, the weight of his presence pressed against the Marine like an invisible wall, one built from honor, memory, and unshakable discipline. The Marine tried again. He leaned forward, almost touching the guard's shoulder. "I demand respect," he barked. "Look at me when I speak to you." The air seemed to still. The wind dropped. The crowd leaned forward, collectively holding its breath. The children's whispers faded. The veterans' mutters died in their throats. Reporters' cameras focused, recording every detail. Every eye followed the silent stalemate. In that instant, the world seemed to narrow to a single point, the unwavering guard standing against the arrogant intruder. Two men, two paths, colliding in a clash that had nothing to do with weapons or war, and everything to do with honor, discipline, and legacy. No one knew what would happen next. Every second felt stretched into eternity. The Russian Marine believed he had power, believed that his rank and medals could command compliance, but he had not accounted for the force that comes from perfect stillness, absolute control, and the history of thousands of fallen soldiers standing behind a man who did not flinch. The crowd's collective heartbeats seemed to synchronize with attention, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the air began to shift. The Marine, bold, arrogant, unaware, had taken the first steps toward crossing a line that no outsider, no matter how decorated, should ever breach. The moment was building. The world was watching, and the tomb guard remained perfectly still. The Russian Marine's smirk faltered for the first time that afternoon. He had circled, shouted, gestured, and leaned, yet the American guard had not moved, not flinched, not acknowledged him in the slightest. That stillness, that refusal to yield, gnawed at his pride. His fists clenched, hidden behind his back, but his chest heaved with frustration. He had believed rank, medals, and reputation were enough. He had believed intimidation would command obedience. He had been wrong. Without thinking, almost instinctively, he stepped closer than protocol, closer than respect, closer than common decency allowed. His polished boots echoed against the marble as he crossed the invisible boundary. The sacred mat where no visitor, no matter their status, was permitted. The air seemed to thicken. A child stifled a gasp behind a mother's hand. Veterans' eyes widened. The tension, already taut, snapped to a new pitch. "Do you understand who you're standing in front of?" The Marine barked, leaning in so that his breath brushed against the guard's cheek. I could, but he did not finish. The guard moved then, but not in the way anyone expected. Not a lunge, not a shout, not a retaliatory shove. Instead, he shifted with precision, pivoting his rifle with a fluid, controlled motion to block any potential aggression. The movement was fast, silent, and disciplined, executed with the elegance of years of practice, yet imbued with an unmistakable authority. The Marine froze mid-step, surprised that his intended intimidation had been anticipated and neutralized without a word. "Stand back," the guard said, his voice calm, measured, but cutting through the tension like a blade. "You are disturbing the tomb of the unknowns." The crowd went silent. Not a whisper, not a camera shutter, not even the wind dared interrupt. Every eye was on them. The Marine's chest rose and fell rapidly. For the first time, he seemed aware not of medals, rank, or history, but of the raw, immovable force before him. He was a visitor in a realm he could never dominate. The guard's calm was deliberate. Every inch of his posture radiated discipline. His rifle was not a threat, but a boundary. His silence was not weakness, but a warning. The Marine realized, perhaps too late, that this man's strength did not come from physical power alone, but from unshakable control, from honor embedded deeper than muscle or metal, from the memory of thousands who had stood and fallen in his place. The Marine stammered, words catching in his throat. He had prepared for confrontation, but he had not prepared for this absolute command of space and principle. The arrogance that had fueled him began to crumble. Pride, once a shield, now felt like chains. The guard stepped slightly forward, maintaining absolute composure. He did not touch the Marine. He did not threaten. He simply existed as a wall of discipline and unwavering duty. The message was clear here on this sacred ground. Nothing, not even the audacity of a decorated foreign soldier, could undermine tradition. The crowd exhaled collectively, though almost imperceptibly, as if the very act of witnessing such unwavering control had drained their tension. Veterans straightened instinctively, some whispering to themselves, "That's how it's done." Children's eyes were wide with awe, not fear. Cameras captured the pivot, the stare, the perfect intersection of discipline and defiance. This would not be forgotten. The Marine made another step, a test of boundaries, perhaps even a challenge, to see if the guard would falter under pressure. His hand reached toward the guard's shoulder, tentative, arrogant. He imagined compliance, imagined a reaction of fear or retreat, imagined dominance. But the guard, anticipating the motion as he had anticipated everything, shifted just enough to block the intrusion without aggression, without breaking protocol. "Do not touch this ground, or any man who honors it," the guard said, voice low, unwavering. The words carried weight far beyond the syllables themselves. They echoed history, respect, and the unspoken power of absolute discipline. The Marine froze, his mind racing. His ego, trained to dominate, now struggled against a principle it could not touch. For one suspended heartbeat, the world seemed to tilt. The intruder realized that no medal, no uniform, no reputation could grant him authority here. The tomb guard was more than a man. He was the embodiment of tradition, memory, and sacrifice. And tradition did not yield. Tradition did not flinch. Then the guard returned to his rhythm. 21 steps. Pause. 21 steps. The movement was calm, unwavering, a silent statement louder than any shout. The Marine, frozen, watched as the reality sank in. He had been bested not by strength, not by violence, but by discipline, by honor, by unshakable adherence to duty. The crowd gasped softly, collectively recognizing the power of what had just occurred. Cameras recorded every second, every movement, every subtle pivot that communicated mastery without aggression. Witnesses would later describe the moment as almost supernatural, how a single man could impose control without touch, command respect without raising his voice, and humble arrogance without lifting a finger in anger. And the Marine, for the first time, understood his mistake. He had crossed the line, literally and metaphorically. He had underestimated the invisible force of history, of training, of honor, and in that realization, the tension broke not in violence, but in recognition. The guard did not celebrate. He did not gloat. He simply resumed his post, each step a silent sermon, discipline over chaos, honor over ego, stillness over arrogance. The Russian Marine stood, stunned, realizing that he had been schooled not by confrontation, but by the unyielding strength of principle. The crowd remained hushed, absorbing the magnitude of what had unfolded. Children whispered, "He's a hero," while veterans nodded, eyes glistening with respect. Cameras continued to roll, capturing a moment that would soon go viral. A moment in which stillness had spoken louder than any words. A moment in which one man's duty had bested another's arrogance. And somewhere in the silence that followed, the world began to understand. Some battles are won not with force, but with honor. Some victories are achieved not with confrontation, but with discipline. And some heroes are recognized not for the battles they fought, but for the quiet strength they embody when all eyes are watching. The Russian Marine stood frozen, his arrogance shattered by a single pivot, a measured step, and the unflinching calm of the tomb guard. For the first time, his polished medals seemed meaningless, his uniform nothing more than fabric. He had expected compliance, acknowledgement, even fear, but what he faced was something far greater, unbroken principle. The crowd could sense the shift immediately. Reporters whispered urgently into cameras, capturing the moment live. Tourists gasped. Veterans straightened instinctively, recognizing the spectacle not as confrontation, but as honor defending itself. Even children instinctively clutched their parents, sensing the weight of the moment. Though they could not understand the full depth of the tradition at play, the Marine, desperate to regain control, took a hesitant step back, but it was too late. Military police, alerted by the crowd and the subtle signals of those who oversaw the tomb, moved swiftly toward him. "Sir, you must step back," one said firmly, hands extended, authority resonating through the marble courtyard. The Marine's pride burned, but he had no choice. There was no room here for ego to overrule order. As the Marine was escorted away, cameras captured the scene, the bewildered expression on his face, the subtle trembling in his stance, the slow realization that he had been best by discipline, not force. The whispers spread through the crowd. He thought he could intimidate him. He was wrong. The moment was electric, charged with the thrill of witnessing tradition triumph over arrogance. The tomb guard, meanwhile, resumed his post without haste, without fanfare. 21 steps. Pause. 21 steps again. The rhythm of duty continued uninterrupted. His movements were a silent sermon, disciplined over chaos, honor over ego, calm over aggression. He did not glance at the departing Marine. He did not acknowledge the applause of the crowd. This was not about recognition, it never had been. It was about duty, tradition, and respect for those who could no longer stand among the living. Every camera in the vicinity captured the moment, yet no lens could fully convey the gravity of what had just occurred. There were no words adequate to describe the depth of control, the absolute command of presence, the way a single man had enforced centuries of tradition simply by standing unwavering. People would later watch the footage and feel a shiver run down their spine, sensing that they had witnessed more than a confrontation, they had witnessed a lesson in honor. The Marine, still escorted away, looked back once over his shoulder. There was no defiance left in his eyes, only understanding. He had crossed boundaries, misjudged strength, and been exposed not by force, but by the unyielding weight of principle. His humiliation was complete, yet silent he would carry the memory with him, a lesson in humility that would outlast any medal or title. Meanwhile, the crowd began to release the tension they had held for minutes that felt like hours. Veterans whispered quietly among themselves, nodding with respect. Tourists lowered their cameras, their eyes reflecting awe. Children tugged at their parents' hands, their whispered words heavy with admiration. "He's a hero." Every spectator, whether aware of the full history or not, had been touched by something deeper than a performance. They had seen the power of steadfast honor embodied in flesh and steel. The tomb guard's calm continued, deliberate and flawless. Each movement was poetry, each pause a testament to discipline. He allowed no interruption, no distraction. Even the cameras could not capture the essence of the moment, that the true power lay not in medals, nor rank, nor shouting, but in unyielding adherence to duty, respect for the fallen, and the silent strength of tradition. And then, as the Marine disappeared from sight, the moment reached its peak. The crowd, almost involuntarily, erupted into subdued applause, whispers of admiration rippling through Arlington. Some veterans saluted, some children clapped softly, their small hands echoing the sentiment of awe. The lesson had been delivered. Arrogance could be humbled, ego could be restrained, and tradition could hold firm even against the boldest challenge. In the quiet aftermath, as the cameras continued rolling, the tomb guard remained at his post, silent and immovable. The world would see this clip and marvel, but only those who understood the depth of sacrifice and discipline would truly grasp the weight of what had been accomplished. The Marine had been exposed, honor had prevailed, and somewhere, in the shadows of countless nameless graves, the fallen seemed to whisper their approval. The crowd slowly began to disperse, leaving behind a silence heavier than any applause. Arlington's marble pathways reflected the afternoon sun, but the memory of the confrontation lingered like a shadow, lingering long after the Russian Marine had been escorted away. Veterans walked with solemn nods, whispering to one another about the display they had just witnessed. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed, repeating small words like hero and brave, though they could not fully understand the depth of what they had seen. The tomb guard remained at his post, boots perfectly aligned, rifle steady, movements precise. Every step, every pause, was a testament to countless hours of training and the memories of fallen comrades he carried silently with him. He did not acknowledge the departing crowd. He did not glance at the cameras. His focus was not on recognition, applause, or viral fame. It was on the sacred duty he had promised to uphold. Later off duty, he walked alone along the rows of white headstones. The sun cast long shadows, and the quiet hum of the cemetery seemed to carry the whispers of those who had come before him. He knelt at one grave, brushing his hand lightly over the inscription, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips. A dog tag, worn and familiar, hung from his neck, a reminder of a friend lost in distant war, a promise made in the dust and chaos of battle. He traced the tag with a fingertip, memories flooding back. The screams, the smoke, the sudden stillness after a loss that had threatened to break him, and yet, here he was, standing watch over the unknown, carrying the honor of countless soldiers who could no longer speak for themselves. That single act of discipline, that refusal to yield to arrogance, was not about proving himself, it was about upholding something far greater than one man's pride. A child. A small voice carried softly on the breeze, tugged at his sleeve. "Sir, you're a hero," she whispered. The guard looked down, meeting her wide, innocent eyes. For a moment he allowed himself a faint smile, not for recognition, not for applause, but for the understanding that sometimes the simplest words could carry the deepest truth. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement that honor, when practiced with integrity, was always recognized even if silently. The colonel, overseeing the ceremonial detail, approached, his face a mix of pride and solemnity. He saluted, and the guard returned it with the same precision he gave to every step at his post. No words were necessary. In that salute, there was a shared understanding, a bond forged by discipline, sacrifice, and respect for the fallen. The cemetery began to quiet, leaving the guard alone once more at his post. He inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day's events settle into a calm resolve. The confrontation with the Russian Marine, the attention of the crowd, the cameras capturing each moment, it was over. What remained was tradition, unbroken and eternal. Each step he took in the shadows of Arlington spoke louder than any words could. It was a promise kept, a duty fulfilled, a silent testimony to the strength found in restraint. But as he resumed his patrol along the tomb, he allowed a single thought to pass through his mind. Honor is not for the living to measure. It is a gift, a legacy, carried quietly and fiercely, preserved in actions more than words. The world had witnessed a lesson that day, but for the guard, the significance was deeply personal. It was about memory, discipline, and the unyielding promise to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long reverent shadows across the cemetery, the tomb guard continued his watch, a silent sentinel. The day's events would live on in photographs and recordings, but his duty was eternal, anchored in quiet strength and unwavering devotion. In that stillness, the world had seen the true power of honor, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. As the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows over Arlington, the tomb guard remained at his post, motionless yet powerful in his stillness. The day's events had ended, but their lesson lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. The crowd had dispersed, the cameras no longer rolling, yet the impact of what had transpired would echo far beyond the cemetery gates. Tradition is not weakness. Stillness is strength. The guard had shown that honor does not demand applause, and courage does not always roar. Sometimes, the greatest victories are silent. Sometimes, the most profound lessons are delivered without a single raised hand or shouted command. The Russian Marine had been confronted not with force, but with discipline, integrity, and the quiet power of duty, a force far stronger than ego, bravado, or intimidation. The lesson was clear. Some battles are not fought in war zones or courtrooms, but in moments where principle meets provocation, and in those moments, the world watches. The crowd, the children, the veterans, the cameras, they all bore witness to a truth older than medals, older than uniforms. Honor endures when it is lived, not performed. The guard's eyes, calm and steady, reflected not pride, but understanding. Every step he took, every measured pause, was a tribute to those who could not stand in their own defense. Every silent second was a promise kept. And in that stillness, the world learned something invaluable: that courage is not always loud, that respect is earned, and that the weight of history rests in the hands of those who choose to carry it faithfully. For those watching, whether in person or through a screen, the story did not end with a confrontation. It ended with a reminder to uphold tradition, to honor sacrifice, to stand firm when the world tests you. The tomb guard had done more than his duty. He had set an example for generations to come. Share this story. Subscribe to witness more moments where honor, courage, and discipline define true heroism. Support the legacy. Let the silence of one man teach the world the power of stillness.